Let's look at various settings you can use to configure a printer. I'm here at the printer folder in the control panel. To configure the printer, I simply right-click it and choose Properties. The General tab shows me information about the printer. For example, I can change the printer name. I can enter a location for the printer and additional comments about the printer. The printer model and the features are automatically determined based on the characteristics of the printer. From the General tab, I could print a test page. So for instance, if I were having trouble with my printer, I could come here and print a test page to see if everything is working correctly. The Ports tab lists the port that is used by the printer. Notice the checkbox next to the port. If I physically moved this printer to a different port, I could simply reconfigure the printer object and select the correct port and then click Apply so that the port now identifies the correct physical port for the printer. This would be easier than, for instance, creating a brand new printer object for when I move the printer to a different port. Depending on the port type, I can configure port information. For instance, the LPT port transmission retry identifies the number of seconds to retry communicating with the printer through that port. For COM ports, I have other information that I can configure, which identifies how data is sent through the port. The Enable Printer Pooling option allows me to select multiple ports for a single print object. Printer pooling allows me to install two physical printers, in this case, one on LPT2 and one on LPT3, and then configure a single printer object for both physical printers. When a print job is sent to the print object would decide to send it to one of the two physical printers. The next print job would go to the other printer. So printer pooling is a way to use multiple printers together without having to configure multiple print objects on my computer. The Advanced tab allows me to configure availability of the printer. By default, it's always available, but I can restrict the hours of the day during which this printer is available. For instance, I could make sure that the printer were only available during normal business hours. Print jobs submitted outside of these hours would not print. I can also view the driver used for this printer. For instance, if I happen to change the physical print device, I could simply change the driver rather than create a new printer object. And additional settings here control how the print jobs are created on this computer. Spooling renders the print job and saves it on the hard disk before the print job is sent. I can either start printing after the page is completely spooled or start printing immediately. Spooling is useful for when the computer can generate a print job faster than the printer can print. You spool the job and save it on your local computer, and then it prints as the print device can keep up. Printing directly to the printer means that the computer must monitor the printer and send the information to the printer as it is capable of receiving it. The Color Management tab allows you to adjust color settings so that the color you see on your screen matches the color that you see that is printed. Color management is managed by using profiles. Profiles define how colors look on the screen and how they match what they look like when they're printed. The Security tab defines who is allowed to print to the printer. The top box identifies users or groups, and the bottom box identifies their allowed permissions to the printer. The print permission allows users to submit print jobs to the printer. The Manage Printers permission allows a user to open the properties and modify the properties as we're doing now for the print object. The Manage Documents permission allows users to manage documents that are sitting in the print queue. By default, everyone can print to a new printer. I could remove everyone and then add in specific users or groups. And then after I add the user, I can specify their level of permissions. The Creator Owner object here is a special group that identifies individual users who have sent a print job. By default, any user who prints can manage their own documents. However, users by default cannot manage any document in the print queue. The Device Settings tab identifies custom settings that are unique to this printer. If I go to a different printer object, the device settings might be different, and this depends on the capabilities of the specific device. Finally, the Maintenance tab allows me to perform maintenance on this printer. For example, one common task is to clean the print heads for the printer. If you get streaks or lines in your printout, you might try cleaning the print head first before troubleshooting other possible causes. And again, the device settings and the maintenance tabs may be different depending on the printer model and the additional software that you have installed. In addition to modifying the printer properties, you can also manage the print server. To manage the print server, right-click in a white area within the printer's box and choose Server Properties. The print server is the software that controls the printers on your computer. For example, the Ports tab shows me all printers connected to all ports on this computer. Notice that the buttons here to manage the ports are disabled. In order to actually modify the ports from the print server properties, I can right-click and choose Run as Administrator. Now when I edit the ports, I can add ports, delete ports, and configure the port settings. These are the same settings that I could configure as a property of the printer object itself, but here I can manage all ports that exist on the computer. The Drivers tab shows me all drivers that are currently installed. For instance, if I need to support another platform such as x64, and again I would need the disk in order to install those additional drivers. I can also remove drivers, or I can examine the properties for a driver. And in this case, it shows me the location of the driver, as well as the files which make up the files that are required for the driver. And finally, on the Advanced tab, I can control how spooling and notification work on this computer. The spool folder is the location where print jobs are saved prior to being sent to the printer. I could, for instance, change the spool location to a different drive or a different folder. Notice that when you change the spool folder, any documents that currently exist in the current folder will no longer print. So that's some information about managing printers. You edit the printer properties to manage information about the printer. For example, two common things you'd use during troubleshooting might be to print a test page to the printer, or to clean the print heads and the print cartridges. You use the print server properties to manage the ports and the drivers for all printers on the computer, as well as to manage the spool folder location and informational and warning event messages that are sent by the computer. We've seen how to manage printer settings in Windows Vista. Now let's look at some minor changes to the interface in Windows 7. From the Start menu, I can view and manage my printers by choosing Devices and Printers. Within Devices and Printers, I can see all of my installed and configured printers. In Windows Vista, we were used to managing printers by right-clicking the printer and choosing Properties. However, in Windows 7, you'll see that the information that I receive by looking at the printer properties is different than what I expected if I had chosen Properties from Windows Vista. Here I'm seeing some detailed information about the hardware, which is something similar to what I might see in Device Manager for another device. If I want to manage my printer settings, I would right-click the printer and choose Printer Properties. This gives me the settings that I expected to see in managing my printer. For example, I can view the ports and manage the driver and additional settings. To manage the print server in Windows Vista and earlier operating systems, I would click within a blank area within my printers folder, and I'd have an option to manage the print server from this menu. However, in Windows 7, there is no option from within the Devices and Printers folder to manage the print server. Instead, to manage the print server, I would go back to the Control Panel, and let's switch to Icon View, and Administrative Tools. Within Administrative Tools, I have a new feature called the Print Management Console. The Print Management Console shows me my installed printers, allowing me to manage those printers and their settings. From here, to modify the printer properties, I would choose Properties from the pop-up menu. To manage the print server settings, I can right-click the print server and choose Properties. And from here, I can modify the same settings that were available to me in previous versions of Windows. For example, I can change the spool folder, I can view the installed drivers, configured ports with their associated printers, and configure additional advanced settings unique to the print server. I can get that same information here by clicking the items beneath the print server. So new in Windows 7 is the Print Management Console. In fact, you can manage all of your printer settings from here, or you can use the new Devices and Printers view within the Control Panel.